mercenaries, and a devil straight from hell. How will the clowns get out of this one? It's just this way at the Dim Carnival.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Dim Carnival. I'm Bill.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Ryan.
And we're here. This week we're talking about the Pendulum comic book, not the CDs that came with the comic book that were then collected into the Pendulum LP. Although Steve is going to talk about some of the tracks from the Pendulum. One is some. But before we jump into that, we're gonna dip into the old sack, by which I mean the mail sack. By which I mean the mail bag.
Hell yeah, we are.
We get letters.
Yeah, we got a bunch of emails, you guys. We have several that I want to talk about.
Nice.
First and foremost, the homie Rob, always coming through with the good information. I posited a question that I believe was rhetorical. Or ended up being rhetorical. I did actually mean it, but it ended up being rhetorical. On the episode last week where I asked whether or not Jump Steady ever got around to telling us about his name and where it came from, which he does not do on that album. However, he does mention it in his autobiography, The Detroit Red, where he actually got...
Oh, Jump Steady has an autobiography too?
Sorry. Malcolm X's autobiography there's a chapter called Detroit Red in Malcolm X's autobiography, and this is where Jump Steady got his name, was from Malcolm X's autobiography.
Wait, so Jump Steady doesn't have an autobiography?
No, I don't know if that... My whole shit just broke.
What?
My fucking... Okay, there... Oh, shit. There's some kind of... Okay, I got it.
Wait, so Jump Steady co-wrote Malcolm X's autobiography?
He sure did. It's just really amazing how... Yeah, I know, right?
It's crazy.
No.
That's maybe the wildest factoid we've ever dropped on this podcast.
Jump Steady does appear in Malcolm X's autobiography. However, it's not Robert Bruce. It's a thief that Malcolm knew, and I guess who was from Detroit. And Jump Steady read that book and just thought it was a really cool name, I guess. And that's where he got it from.
Sweet.
You know.
Jiggles, the homie Jiggles, he emailed us because he had a question, and I'm curious what you guys think about this. I don't actually know too much about the history of Dr. Dre and Eminem's relationship. But Jeremy was curious whether he said he's just been listening to a lot of a certain type of music lately, and it's caused him to come up with this question whether or not Dr. Dre was kind of monitoring what was going on in hip hop in the 90s. There's a lot of similarities between samples that appear from Detroit rappers like Esham later appear the same sample in a Dr. Dre song. And I guess it's not, it's probably likely coincidence, but it is kind of interesting in that he ended up pursuing Eminem versus other artists in that area who were maybe too niche or hadn't really broken through to the mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I have absolutely zero doubt that Dr. Dre was monitoring the hip hop scene because after the Chronic hit, and it was such a massive hit, and like Dr. Dre was already an established, popular, successful rapper at the time. But then like when Death Row blew the fuck up, and like Dre started cultivating Snoop, and then Snoop blew the fuck up, and then Dre, like, you would see later in life as Dr. Dre became a like billionaire entrepreneur after he became a successful label runner. Like, yeah, I don't have any doubt that he was like, once the Chronic dropped, he was probably like, oh, I cultivated Snoop and launched his career, and now I'm going to do this with all these other people, and now I got to keep my finger on the pulse more than ever.
Right.
I mean, the dude started NWA. Like, Dr. Dre's like been at the forefront of everything the whole time. At least as far as the West Coast goes.
As far as I know, that's fair. That's a fair statement.
Back when he was wearing Dr. Scrubs, he was the Dr. Dre, producing gimmick hip hop tracks in the the mid '80s about Frankenstein and Wolfman. You guys know about that?
No.
One of the first tracks that Dr. Dre ever produced, he didn't rap on it, but I think it was called Monster Rap, and it's just a gimmick. 7, because all hip hop singles back then were 7 minutes long or 13 minutes long, so it was a gimmick single called Monster Rap about it was 7 minutes long, and it's about Dracula and Frankenstein will always be friends.
That sounds pretty good, man.
Yeah, no, it's really good. I recommend it. You guys should check it out. Do we have another email?
We do. We got an email from a new listener, Bryce. I'm gonna call him the homie Bryce, or I guess he used to go by the handle Mobad, so maybe he prefers that. But Bryce, you can let us know.
Some Mobad or Blues.
Bryce wrote in. He gave us a lot of stuff. He gave us a lot of feedback.
Is Mobad when a nomad has a cold? Sorry. It's the fourth strong bad brother. Mobad.
You got it. First thing he suggests is he wants to recommend another Juggalo podcast, The Murder Mayhem Show. And if I'm not mistaken, Steve, you're familiar with Murder Mayhem Show?
Yeah, I was just telling that. Yeah, I have twice, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And I was just talking to him on Twitter, I told him I liked him. And he was my number one source for Juggalo news, and he got very excited about that. It started he had a poll about what was a song that should be on that you think would be on a Joker's card, and I said Jacob's Word, and from there I talked with him a little bit. So it's cool. Yeah, Murder Mayhem Show, and I've listened to one of his podcasts, and it was pretty sweet.
Yeah, but Murder Mayhem Show is an ICP news and information podcast. I haven't listened to it yet though. But he also recommends there's a podcast that's called Deprogrammed, which I guess did an ICP episode. Which he wanted to recommend, and I think it's super cool. So that reminded me I wanted to also talk about. I mentioned before Think Outside the Box set, and hopefully folks have checked them out. Really dug their episodes, and we were linked on Twitter to another podcast that just started a couple weeks ago called Juggalo Judgment, and it's two friends, a guy who has a history, who identifies as Juggalo, has a history of listening to ICP. And a friend of his who has no history of listening to ICP has heard some mixed tracks here and there. And they're basically doing the same thing as we are, but they're doing album by album. And so I'm super excited that when we started and we looked around, we couldn't find anything, right, that anybody was doing like this. And so it's exciting to me that there's other people who are doing that. It's interesting.
We're spurring people. People are listening to us and they're we can do that better. And you fucking can, for sure. So
none of those dudes had heard of us.
Yeah, okay, good.
Bryce does let us know that, Bill, you're probably his favorite on the squad. So props to you.
Shit.
Nice.
That.
Well, I'm always terrified that everyone finds me very, very annoying.
I'm right there with you, man. Do
you think I'm annoying? Cool.
I always think that they're oh, that idiot's talking now. That's what I always think about my little piece.
This piece of shit.
I think we've already covered that we all feel that way about it. So if anybody likes any of us, I mean, obviously people are continue to listen. So, but whatever. One, he makes a couple of really good suggestions. So one is that he says he really loves the format of the show, and that he is really encouraging us not to rush and try to get too much into one episode. Specifically, he didn't really care for the fact that we covered 3 CDs in one episode. I know that we just weren't going to be able to pull out full episodes for those, and so but I do appreciate the suggestion. And he also makes a recommendation that there's a ton of other content that if we really did want to kind of bask in this time with ICP, that there's a lot of content that we could also cover, from Howard Stern or Loveline shows, the Shockumentary, Stranglemania. I think that would be really fun to talk about.
Yes.
The Purple Show, Shaggy Show. There's a lot of and the board
Let me
game.
just allow me to part the kimono here a bit, Ryan.
Yeah.
And let our listeners know I'm about to have a kid in a couple months, so we're just trying to get through Hell's Pit before that happens. So like I have hope that one day we will get through everything. I don't know if we've announced, Ryan, have we announced on the show that we were planning to take a little mini break after Hell's Pit anyway? I don't know if we have officially announced that.
No,
All right, do you want me to not mention that?
No, I think now's as good a time as any. We're getting running up to
it. Yeah, we're running up again it. So we might take a little hiatus. It's our hope that we'll actually be able to end up stockpiling a bunch of stuff. So maybe we won't take a hiatus at all, but it is a possibility. But right now we're just focused on trying to get to Hell's Pit, and there is still stuff before Hell's Pit anyway. After we finish Shangri-La, there's Cracked Tiles by Zeg Island, there's Hatchet Warrior by Anybody Killa, there's Twisted Screen Book, and then of course Violent J's Wizard of the Hood. We are definitely going to cover. There's the second Dark Lotus album. You know, there's a lot of stuff that's happening. So we're gonna get to it. We're gonna get to it all at some point, but we're just trying to get through the Wraith and then get through the other Wraith before we gotta get our schedules very tight for a bit. So yeah, there is a bunch of stuff we can mine, and there's also the chance that like maybe we'll get to Fred Fury. You know, like there's a chance we'll get to Fred Fury before too much other ICP stuff drops, and then we'll have to go back and find some oddities. So like maybe and not just the oddities theme song. And so maybe it's just good that we're not really diving too deep into the music that came with the Pendulum right now. You know, we have skipped some other stuff. You know, there's a lot of Esham albums we haven't listened to, for example, like 47 Esham albums. So yeah, we should definitely do Stranglemania though, like at some point soon. So, let's put a pin in that.
My copy of Into the Echo Side has arrived. So,
nice.
If we can play that.
You know what? That might be a good thing for you to bring, in July when you guys come down here for my birthday.
Exactly.
So we can do a couple, episodes, and one of them can be us playing Echo Side.
That would be spectacular.
That would be awesome.
But yeah, Bryce, if you're listening, man, I just want to let you know, really appreciate your email. He did give us some criticism, some critical feedback as well, which we are definitely going to take into consideration. So just really want to let everybody know that we appreciate the things you like about the show and suggestions that you have for us to improve and make it better. Definitely appreciate that. And he signs it out. It went straight to my heart. It said, "Long live the Dim Fam."
Rumbling, stumbling, bumbling.
Long live the Dim Fam. Made me feel real good. Thanks, Bryce.
That's awesome.
And then the last one before we can get this is a great segue. The homie Toby, we got our first international listener email.
Hell yeah.
What is up, MC Cryptid, emailing us from the UK. And I actually looked up MC Cryptid's stuff, found some of his music, and I'm actually going to drop one of his tracks that I thought was outstanding. The Monster is out there too at the end of this episode, so be sure to stick around for that at the end. So thanks for emailing us. And he suggested if we wanted an in-depth look at this comic book that we're just about to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
He was recommending a podcast called the Cosmic Treadmill. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with that?
No.
It's a comic book history podcast. But episode 129, they cover this, and I'm going to recommend that to our listeners completely unheard.
Nice. I love it. So I do, before we dive in, it may not be relevant anymore by the time this episode drops, because the thing I'm talking about happens on Wednesday. Our episodes drop on Thursday. But Wednesday, March 27th, Psychopathic Records store is putting up Violent J's Brother EP. When Violent J recently went on his aborted solo tour, which we talked about, he did play a few dates on that. And before the solo tour happened, they had announced that the solo tour was the only place you could pick up Violent J's new EP, which was called like Blacked Eyes or Black Eyed. It was called Black Eyed Kids, I think. and they ended up changing the name of the EP to the Brother EP, and it has a big drawing of Hulk Hogan's face on the cover.
Looks great.
So I don't know if it's a diss to him or if it's a shout out to him. I think both are equally possible. But they're dropping. There's only going to be 1,000 copies that they're going to put on Psychopathic Records, or psychopathicmerch.com, I believe is the URL. There's only going to be 1,000 copies that they're ever going to sell on the website, and they're ever going to sell anywhere. The caveat is that the EPs are $25 a copy. But again, they're very limited. And there is a 1 in 5 chance, because they're going to put 200 of these out. There is a 1 in 5 chance that your copy will be shipped shrink wrapped with a second 2-song CD that is signed and hand numbered by Violent J. And this is the only way you could get that. But they have said that if you happen to order 5 copies of the EP, you are guaranteed one. So they will be randomly distributed, but if you drop 100 bones, you get one. So,
dude, those are gonna sell out in a minute.
Yeah,
but 1,000, they're be gone.
But it happened. So I mean, I'm gonna try and pick one up. So we'll see. I'm gonna try to pick one up, and hopefully I win. I get lucky. So yeah.
You might as well do Twisted's 10K giveaway while you're at it.
When does it drop?
Drops on Wednesday morning. Or at some. They actually didn't say a time. They just said Wednesday. Hopefully it doesn't go up at midnight.
That's yesterday if you're listening to it on the podcast.
So our apologies for me. Anyway, that's what happened. So now let's talk about. We gave you information on one of the places you can find this comic book online. But at long last, without further ado, let us talk about the 12-issue limited series, The Pendulum. Written by some comic book artists and writers with. So issue one and issues 3 through 12 say writer based on a story by Jumpsteady. Issue 2 says based on a story by ICP, but I think it's just Jumpsteady. That was a mistake.
Yeah, you're right, man. Weird.
Let me.
Well,
yes.
There's some other weird things about issue 2.
There's some weird things about all of it, Steve. Let me just say off the bat, I hated every second of this. And I've read probably at least a couple thousand comic books in my day. This is easily the worst comic book I've ever read. And it was 12 issues. And I understand why it was 12 issues. I understand that they wanted to do like a year of a comic book, but most importantly, they wanted to do, a special CD with each comic. And I will say the CDs were cool enough that it was probably worth the cover price to pay, especially now. I bet you can buy it. Yeah. But it was worth the cover price. And then when you get all the CDs, not only do you have a stack of 12 CDs with one song each on them, but they each came with a little slipcase, and the slipcases, you put them all together and you form the cover of ICP Pendulum issue number 12. So that's cool. You need a little collectible. Super, like, the Wicked Clowns are great at marketing. They're great at
like Garbage Pail Kids.
They know how to sell you shit. But this comic was fucking hot garbage, and it was so heavily influenced by everything that was happening in the comic book industry, like circa, Image breaking away, and like Malibu Comics and like Mirage Comics and everything, and all these like, Rob Liefeld and fucking, everybody else who was just about like big dudes who looked like veiny throbbing dicks, like chopping people's heads off, like Blood Wolf era, darker Image style, like it was edgelord the comic book basically. And I get that if you're going to try and translate ICP into a comic book, this is probably what you're going to end up with, especially at that point in time. But it's a bummer because like, I felt like there was kind of like, oh, maybe we'll get some more, like we'll get in depth in the ICP mythology, and we did get a little bit of Dark Carnival mythology here and there, but I feel that this comic book is very stridently non-canon. And they say some very weird things in here that doesn't mesh at all with the rest of ICP mythology. So I'm choosing to say that this comic book is non-canon. Those are my overall thoughts. You guys, I'll let you guys say your piece, and then we'll dive in a little bit.
Well, I mean, just for the sake of the immediacy of not canon, there is no member of Dark Lotus that is a priest named Jesus who does faith healing miracles.
Well, maybe that was Mars.
Oh. He's Jesus, dude.
What did you think of the comic, Steve?
Well, when I was reading it, I was having such a hard time, and I read it all 12 issues in a row. I just sat down and powered through it.
Wow.
And it was kind of hard because it was, on my iPad. And so it was weird because, every few pages there was this lady dressed as, Sailor Moon or something. I don't know. They kept saying, meet her somewhere. So that was kind of hard to, navigate through to read the comic as well.
Oh, sorry. I have ad blocker installed, so I didn't see that.
Oh, yeah. So, but anyhow. Actually, it kind of made it entertaining.
The best part of this comic book was the pop-up ads.
Yeah. No, but it was just funny. Power through it like that and all the stuff that took away from it, I still walked away saying it wasn't the worst comic I ever read. And the only reason why I could say that, Bill, is because I read Archie evangelical Christian comic. And those were worse than this
but
still.
Probably better written and more coherent, right?
Well, yeah, because they were the Gospels. Yeah, God, it was so hard and I hated it.
Oh, it was agony. It was I apologize to all of our listeners for suggesting that you should read this comic book. You definitely shouldn't. You don't have to. Please don't.
So guys, in addition, so you guys, I'm taking away that mostly your criticism here is with the content of the book.
No,
what else
in terms of the story? Well, because I want to hear what you have to say, Steve. But what I actually had a difficult time reading this book because of the way that it's actually laid out on the page. That there's not a lot of intuitive movement from dialogue bubble to dialogue bubble.
Here is what the word that kept springing to mind, whether you're talking about the story, the plotting, the script, the layout, the art, or any of the aspects of the presentation of the comic book, up to and including every aspect of the comic book. Here's the word that I think can describe all of it. Incomprehensible. There is absolutely no fucking, ICP don't look like ICP. Shaggy's hair changes in the first.
Oh my god, I loved it.
The first 3 issues.
Yeah. He goes from bald, in issue 2. I didn't even know which one was which.
Right,
I had to
same
do
hair.
it based on what they were saying
or their makeup. Yeah,
They have the exact same proportions and dimensions, and Violet J. Q's referring to himself as fat.
Yeah!
Okay.
At one point, he has a 6-pack and big old
super
buff
rich.
and it's just I'm
ripped.
fat.
Yeah. But yeah, no, none of the action, none of the fucking action makes sense.
No, I could never understand what was happening.
Show up and disappear oh my god, fucking I hate so much all of this, but I hate this, because the thing that was the worst part about the Liefeld and that era of Image Comics and everything is everything was about the art. It was 100% about the art and how hyper stylized and over the top and violent everything was. But at the same time, the people writing those comic books felt that the art was so incomprehensible that they had to have 1,000,000 words on every page trying to explain what the fuck I was looking at or was going on, and failed at every turn. So like there will be just panels of like action where you're like, I don't know who's dying, I don't know who's living, I don't know what's happening, I don't know what direction I'm supposed to be reading this comic book page.
I know, that was the other thing. I didn't know which. Am I going down? Am I going left or right?
And there will be a close up of someone, and it'll be like legit 2,000 words on that page. And then, like, every other page, like, they don't even utilize the entire page for layout. It just has, like, ICP really big in the background.
I wanted to point that out. They're like, there's still more space. You're like, right, ICP.
Like, look, I could use this space on the comic book to have another panel or two that helps clarify action or story. However, the script said 3 panels on this page, so I guess I'm going to fill the space with a demon face.
Just put a lot of smoke with Twisted written in there somewhere.
Jesus Christ. Oh, my God. Like,
however, there was a story.
Dude, and also, there are like 6 characters that look exactly the same, not counting ICP. Like, Mr. Gray, who runs Stress Team, he is the exact same character as Jesus. Like, they have the same haircut.
He's not far off from Kilnor.
Yeah, no, they're all the same. Everyone in this comic.
So there was one thing.
Jesus.
At least I don't even know what episode or issue it was.
Kilnor!
Kilnor sitting, but when he's in his human form, he's sitting. He's like watching these panels of monitor. He has this big monitor set up on his wall, and he's watching all this violent stuff happening. And one of the panels is Michael Myers with his knife. And I thought that was awesome. And I was like, hey. Is Michael Myers one of his minions too, or is he watching Halloween?
He's definitely watching Halloween because like the news is up there and like a closed circuit TV is up there. He's watching Cat Dog, so he's got Nicktoons on, and he's also watching NASCAR. And there are like 3 or 4 NASCAR references that I was able to find.
I think that the artist probably likes NASCAR.
There's a Jeff Gordon cereal. In the background, and there's a refrigerator calendar, a NASCAR refrigerator calendar in the background of one of the panels.
Wow. So I feel like Jump City gave the writer like fairly in-depth notes about the Dark Carnival mythology, and then the only notes about ICP were funny, love to kill people, really hate gays.
Yeah, the homophobia is rampant.
So much.
Like, every insult is a homophobic insult. They take the time in the comic book to drive past a Feminim concert, which is a couple pages of extended gay jokes, and then chop Eminem's head off.
Okay, but the lady then steals the head, shoves it in her purse as she scampers away, and I thought that was very funny.
It is funny, but everything else wasn't. It's just so bad. It's so bad. Like, I think the closest thing to an actual good joke is the cowboy who keeps getting like almost killed by a bunch of people. Like, that's the closest thing to a good joke, but it's handled so inelegantly. And like, the lyrics of the country song he's listened to on the radio are so stupid and awful. And like, it's like you almost backed into a decent joke there, but then you fucked it up at every turn. Like, I don't understand any of the story. At first, it seemed like the Stress Team was sent by Kilnor, and then at the end, the Stress Team is helping ICP blow up demons with bazookas and shit. Everything with the Stress Team is so stupid. And like, and so I feel like this team maybe could have made a coherent, okay story if it were 4 issues or even 6 issues, but they had to stretch this out to 20 plus page comic books. And like, there's so many issues where like Stress Team is about to like get the drop on ICP, and like the guy commanding Stress Team or like the guy in the room is like, no, hang on, let's wait. And then like they don't attack, so ICP gets away, like for no reason.
Kind of like Metalocalypse.
Yeah, kind of, but not good.
I feel like the SWAT team really takes away from the whole story.
So bad.
And I feel like if the SWAT part was omitted, then it would be a lot more entertaining and it would probably flow like in a better pace.
I don't even know why. There's absolutely no reason why they're there.
Because you get to put explosions and shit. Like, Jump Steady. Picture him in Big Money Hustlers. Like, that's probably who he's thinking about.
Benjamin. But ICP had no problem causing explosions on their own.
That's true.
Also, so they're called the Stress Team. But in the final issue, there's a big close-up of one of the members. Like, there's a big close-up. It takes up a quarter of the page of this guy's head and shoulders, and he's wearing a beanie. And the word on the beanie is pointing right at the reader. And it says, Stess. Because what they did was the penciler fucked it up, and then the inker, whose first language is not English, was like, all right, here we go, fucking Stess. Because the inker, I do want to, this guy's story is really interesting. Sandu Floria was born in Romania in 1946. Wow. And he first got his start in on a science fiction and comic book genre set of books in the 1970s in Romania called Galbar. And that's crazy. He was born in Romania and he was born in Romania right after World War II. And became a comic book artist in Romania, and then came over to America and started doing a bunch of he worked on Batman R.I.P. He worked on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He worked on some X-Men stuff. He worked on Batman Battle for the Cowl. He's worked for basically everybody, and unfortunately, he had to work on this comic book.
Can we talk about the art a little bit? I feel like there are some really, really wonderful panels throughout this book. I think for the most part, it's pretty. What you said earlier is my main criticism, is that oftentimes it's hard to tell which character is talking or which character is whom. But I don't know. The art, to me, it reminded me of one of the first comics that I ever bought as a little kid. Was a trade paperback of the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, the Mirage comics.
Yeah, and it was about this detailed. Looked about this quality.
Sure.
In my eyes. And then also, what was the other one? Shoot, can't remember now. But I think it's the other thing that you mentioned about them filling up the space with just words and stuff like that. It makes it feel like a little bit of a hack job, I guess.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Sorry.
And then in terms of the story, I was saying, I thought the SWAT part kind of drew away from it, but there is the part when the Dark Carnival actually arrives, when they're in Wichita, and that is the best part of the book for me. It's the most interesting. But I did also love when all of the Dark Carnival elements showed up. Ringmaster shows up and kills a bunch of demons. Riddlebox gets summoned multiple times. Jack and Jake Jekyll show up. And I dug all of that stuff. And I wish that they had done more. It seemed like they were setting up. It was cool when they were looking out over the field and you see the green wisps of smoke and shit going all over, and they can hear the sounds of the carnival being built. And all the people in town are for no reason, or they don't understand why they're being drawn out, and they all go through the carnival. And then the other thing, Shaggy starts explaining to Jesus, I think it is, what this Dark Carnival is, or maybe it's Mr. Gray.
Who can say?
Who fucking knows? And one thing that he says is that everybody goes to the carnival, and a lot of people will make it out and go home.
Yeah.
And that's that never really occurred to me, because I assume that it's a place where you go when you die. And so that's a little bit different, that these folks are gonna experience. This is what the carnival has become, is something that you experience in your life that helps push you into a more moral direction.
Yeah. Okay. So I do remember the one funny thing I thought was actually funny in the comic was when they're talking to the Nazis, and the one Nazi says, "What's with the face paint? You hiding something?" And Violent J just deadpan says, "I should hide your face in your ass." I thought that was funny.
So did the Nazi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also didn't like. I mean, this is stuff that we know now, and we didn't necessarily know when this comic book came out, or we weren't as thinking as critically about it. But I didn't even like the big dumb Nazi laughing at his Nazi friends getting beat up, because it like normalizes and says like, oh, some people are just misled, and like, you know, they're just with Nazis because their friends are Nazis, so they just tag along. But you know, they're not necessarily bad because they're Nazis, which is fucking stupid. Like. Anyway, that's a longer conversation probably, but, there's so much bad stuff. Like, yeah, occasionally the Dark Carnival stuff and the mythology was interesting, and you always wanted to know more about it and you never got it. And I think the worst part about all of the Dark Carnival stuff is like, it all shows up out of place. It's all disjointed. None of it connects to anything else. And there's never a reason for it happening, and it all happens out of order. Like the first time you get any Dark Carnival mythology, so the comic book starts with Shaggy having been shot because they were killing the mayor.
Yeah.
They were killing the mayor and all of, like, it starts after they've killed the mayor and all of his henchmen. Hooray. And they're making their getaway. They were just getting like snippets of a news report. Also, none of the narration boxes are ever tied to anyone. So it starts with Shaggy being shot and like being bummed out because he's bleeding everywhere. And they're like sort of insinuating Shaggy might die if he doesn't get help. Even though Wicked Clowns never die. And so Jay summons the riddle box. Doesn't explain what it is. And I know that this is for Juggalos, like it's a comic book for Juggalos, but it lacks like just the very basic storytelling structure that you need to make a story coherent.
Well, I assume there were comics before these.
There were
that
not.
Kind of explain stuff. There were not.
I'm sure there were.
Oh, were there?
ICP had many comics before this.
What?
They had a whole series of comics before
That's
this.
what I thought, because I remember reading like stuff where, like comics where they're doing jokes from Carnival of Carnage, where he's the clown at the carnival and he chops the dude's head off in front of his daughter or kid or whatever. You know, that like little.
That was a skit in the album.
Yeah, and they played that out in a comic.
Right, that is in a comic. I think it's in the first issue. So I have Chaos Comics #1 from June '99, Insane Clown Posse: The Ups and Downs of the Wicked Clowns, the first Insane issue, and I believe that is the one. It's a single issue. I haven't opened it or looked at it in a long time, but I have it. I also have #1, Volume 2, Insane Clown Posse: The Amazing Jekyll Brothers, and I have Insane Clown Posse #1, Volume 3, Raise the Deserts of Glass. And I have an alternate cover of that one too, apparently, 2 issues of that. Damn. So yeah, I mean, who fucking knew that I had 6 ICP comics like chilling in my attic, but here they are.
Well, I think my point still stands. I had no idea there were comics that came before these, and reading this, you would have no idea there were comics that came before these. So the first time you get the Dark Carnival, the riddle box shows up, they don't explain what it is, and so the first time they contact the Dark Carnival says, "I'm not always going to help you out," which in the context of the riddle box makes a lot of sense. Makes perfect sense. That's what the riddle box would do. It wouldn't always assist them. In that case, how about have that not be the first time we're exposed to the Dark Carnival? How about the first time we're exposed to the Dark Carnival, it's maybe the Ringmaster who helps them out a little bit, and then like that's why they're in debt to him later. Or you know, anything. But it's like the riddle box is like just takes like 600 words to be like, now you're on your own. And then they go to Jesus at a church, and he heals them, and he doesn't know why. And like he heals them, and then like there's no like, oh, I've never done that before. It's just like, oh, you're healed now. And then like several pages later, he's like, I should get to the bottom of why I was able to heal them. Like, so it's just all very, very bad. And then like the Jekyll brothers show up on their TV, and it doesn't really explain what their deal is or like why they're in a TV. I mean, like I get it, but it's not like nothing's intuitive. And then like the Ringmaster, and then like later the Ringmaster, the Jekyll brothers, and Malenko, I think, all team up. but just to like distract like these gangbangers, and like they're just like doing shit in the background, and then like
doesn't Malenko get like knocked out or something?
No, so they show up in the background, they're like doing stuff while ICP's doing other stuff, and like none of it makes any sense, like none of it reads, it's not action that's intuitive. And then like Malenko like disappears, and they're like, all right, Malenko's peacing out. I guess he's done helping us. It's also so we were talking about the background ICPs. At one point in the either 11th or 12th issue, one of the background things, not related to anything else that's happening on the page, but there's just a big piece of the page that says, "Kill Bin Laden."
Yes. Yes. The clown is
that.
red, white, and blue. Yes.
There's some pretty interesting stuff in the background, and I was trying to. There's a lot of tags with names and things.
Kill Bin Laden.
But there, I couldn't figure out who any of them were. There's a lot of names that I googled, and I couldn't figure out if they were anybody, except for there was one, and it says Nikki Fulter is what it looks like to me. Fulter. There's nobody named Nikki Fulter. I mean, there is, but there's nobody famous. But there is somebody that is relatively famous named Nikki Fuller. She is a world-renowned female bodybuilder, and she wrestled in Women of Wrestling under the name Athena.
Mm.
And she also wrestled under Ultimate Pro Wrestling. And so I have to feel like that's enough of a connection that's who they're talking
Now, wait
about.
a second, Ryan. Are you suggesting that something in this comic book series was misspelled?
Yes.
Surely not this comic book series.
Okay. There are two things in this book that I laughed at.
Okay.
The first thing, and I don't have them I don't think this is the order that they happened, but one of the things that made me laugh is there's a time when the Highway Patrol pull over Twisted, which in my opinion, Twisted, apart from the Dark Carnival and all that stuff, I thought Twisted was the best part of the book. The hearse that they're driving around in was fucking awesome. Jamie Madrox is fucking saying all kinds of weird shit like Twisted finesses the nightscape to like that's supposed to mean something. I fucking love that. Finesse the nightscape is fucking amazing. But there's a part where they get pulled over by the cops and the Highway Patrol, and when they roll down the window, the look on the Highway Patrolman's face, he says, "What the fuck?" and he just looks terrified.
Yeah.
That made me laugh. And then there's another part, and I think it's with the Nazis, maybe, where he pulls the guy's guts out and makes him into a balloon animal swan. So he's like showing him his guts. He's like, "See, I made a swan."
Oh yeah. I didn't really I didn't fully understand that, like that one panel to the next, because again, most of it was just there's no making heads or tails of it. But I got it now that you said it. Like now I understand, because I remember that panel.
So what I kept feeling reading the thing, apart from, I'm going to say it again because it was so difficult, like not knowing which bubble to read next.
Right.
I found that I ultimately would have to end up reading it multiple times to try to figure out the sequence, which was really bad. But I also felt a lot of the drawings, a lot of the imagery was like moments later in time than it should be.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was more resolution of action than setting up action.
Yeah.
And so that made it really, that just makes it so hard to read because you have to put it together in your brain. And so that's what I was thinking. When you listen to an ICP album, they're telling the story and you're picturing it in your mind. And that's what you have to do with this comic book also, is read the story, look at the images, and then picture in your mind what it would really look like. And it's fucking awesome. It's a great story if you do that.
Also, there's so much cussing and there's so much like dirty adult stuff and there's like a lot of gore, but there's really not like gory gore until like issue 11.
Right. Not much very good gore until you start cutting people's heads off.
Also, like violent, like I didn't understand when he chops the jock's head off and he's like, "I always wanted to do this," and I was like, "Cut a head off? You've been doing it for like 10 issues, dude." Anyway, so they beat like again, guys, I could not discern what the fuck story they were telling, but they beat the Kilnor or whatever at the end by turning, like rising from the dead and turning into Dark Lotus, and they basically join hands and beat the villain with a Care Bear stare. And at that point when they like turn into like that was the first time in the whole series where I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, when they got the Dark Lotus faces, and then they like rose from the dead and got the Dark Lotus faces, and when like the 4 of them have their hands joined and they're like staring, or 5 of them, and then I was like, oh, I guess Jesus is supposed to be like Blaze or Anybody Killer, or maybe he's supposed to be Mars. I don't know, but it's very, very weird to me that. Like, Jesus existing in the first place is weird to me, but, like, it's very weird to me that, like, they would have Twisted and ICP become Dark Lotus with another person, but that person's not supposed to represent anyone who's in Dark Lotus.
I know.
Maybe it was in between.
I can't. But they did say one thing about the mythology, which this is the moment where I was like, okay, well, this is definitely non-canon. So they said Dark Lotus is the very essence that empowers the Dark Carnival with its life force. That's not right. How could that possibly be? Because they're like, what's Dark Lotus? And then they said that line. Right. So again, like, none of the Dark Carnival mythology matches up either with what we know or with like the pieces of each other. Because like you said, the Dark Carnival actually comes in Wichita, and then later at the end, when they win, they're like, well, the Dark Carnival's going to be here soon because we're in the end times. Like, is it going city by city?
Yeah.
Or I think they forgot the Dark Carnival actually came to Earth.
Well, and it's from the nether world, so, right, from the edges of that world.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure whether they meant it was coming back to take, because they talked about how the netherworld was going to get destroyed, right? The Dark Carnival comes. It's basically the apocalypse, and then hell gets destroyed, and that's why those demons are coming up, because they want to take over heaven, so that they can live in heaven, because the netherworld will have been destroyed.
Also, the ending of the whole thing doesn't really end. Like, it doesn't have an ending. They're just like in hell or whatever. And they're like, well, I guess we better go fuck some ladies. And then they all turn to the camera and it's like, do 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 do.
I've been looking at my notes and I found one other note of something that I laughed at. And that's when I can't even remember when it is. I think it's early on in the book. They're on the rooftop. And they can't leave because the building is surrounded by cops. Yeah. And they chuck a rock and hit one of the cops with a rock, and then they just laugh about it. And that just seems like such a juvenile, stupid thing for these semi-immortal, guys.
Yeah. Like, sometimes they act like ICP, and most of the time they just are dickheads. Like, and I know ICP is probably dickheads, but like, what it read like to me. And it makes even more sense after I looked this guy up. What it read like to me was like, it was a writer who kind of knew what he was doing and kind of understood how to do gags, but he felt the need to get everything that Jumpsteady wanted him to get into the comic, and had to shoehorn what he thought were ICP's personalities onto these characters in the comic book, and had to do fan service to like what he was told fans would expect from an ICP comic book and all that stuff. So Jesse McCann is the person who wrote the story, and the comic book writer that I think this is, the only other Jesse McCann who really would seem to line up, was a guy who wrote a bunch of Simpsons comics for Bongo Comics. So he wrote a shit ton of
I have some of those
stories and full scripts for a bunch of Bongo Comics Simpsons stories. So like, once I read that, I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense. I can see that this guy would probably be able to do a much better job doing funny Simpsons stories with very established characters that are very easy to write because they fall into like, complete archetypes now. Like, people know who Bart Simpson is. People know who Homer Simpson is and how they would behave in a story and how they would behave in a comic book, as opposed to like, even like me and you guys, like if you asked us, like, write an Insane Clown Posse comic book, it wouldn't be easy because you'd have to like have their crazy zaniness and their like incredible funniness. But like, if we were also given a directive of like, make sure they fuck and make sure it's really gory and make sure that there's military in it. Like, we'd be like, fucking, I don't know. So I get it. I understand it wasn't an easy lift, especially when, like, I don't know if they did this, like, Marvel method, that would be, like, even more horrifying. Do you guys know about Marvel method of writing a comic?
No.
Marvel method developed by Stan Lee, which explains a lot about Stan Lee and early Marvel comics and how Marvel comics operated up until like at least the late 80s to like it's basically how they operated up until the mid 90s. Like DC would do full scripts for comic books, where the writer would say like, here's the panels that are on each page and here's what they say in each panel and whatnot. But Marvel method was Stan Lee would do a plot of the story and be like, all right, here's the plot of what's going to happen in this issue. And he'd give it to Jack Kirby or Ditko or whoever. And they would draw the whole comic book. They would just lay out the whole comic book. They would draw the whole comic book. And then Stan Lee would get the finished comic book. And then he'd go back in and write the story and put the words in. So basically he'd be like, all right, Jack, in this episode, this issue of the comic book, the Fantastic Four are going to fight Dr. Doom. And Dr. Doom, he's a mean guy. And he's as smart as Reed Richards. But his face was scarred, so he wears a suit of armor. He rules a country called Latveria. So write the comic, and then I'll do the script. And so, like, that's as much as Jack Kirby would have to go on. And then Jack Kirby would, like, do the fucking entire thing. And then Stan Lee would get it back and be like, oh, okay, so this is a story you thought it would be. All right, I'll put 10,000 words on it. And he would put fucking jam-pack, because, like, there's probably no one who's contributed more to the visual art of storytelling than Jack Kirby. And his art is so easy to follow and so crisp, and like everything makes perfect sense. You can read a Jack Kirby comic without any words. Yet Stan Lee was like, I'll explain every detail. The thing will be throwing a punch and have time to say 4 paragraphs.
Love it.
So like maybe Jumpsteady was like, all right, issue 1, Shaggy gets shot and a priest heals him. Issue 2, there's a military guy, but the Jekyll brothers talk to ICP and get him out of the jam. And then maybe the artist drew it and the writer got it at that point, was like, what the fuck is going on here? All right. Anyway, terrifying to think about. Sorry, I'm ripping on this comic so much. I know you guys liked it a lot.
I'm surprised.
You're surprised I hated it?
Yeah.
Really?
I'm surprised you didn't like it so much.
Well, maybe if I had gotten high before reading it. I read it in like maybe 3 sittings. I read it in no more than 3 sittings. But like Steve said, like it was like pulling teeth. It was just so hard, so bad to read and so difficult to read. And just like I was reading it and I was like I would get to the next page and be like, well, what did it say on the previous page? Well, I'm not fucking going back. Like, there's no chance that I was going to subject myself to an instant more than I had to read it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I just started skimming some of it a little bit, because it said a lot of the same things. And, I mean, not exactly, but the same things just said in different ways. And they kept calling on the Joker's card characters, and sometimes they were cool and sometimes they weren't. Violent J had to save one of them once, and
like Ringmaster shows up in hell, and they're like, "Hey, now we're set." And Ringmaster was like, "I just wanted to come watch you guys die."
Yeah.
And then later he's like, "All right, I'm gonna help you guys. Now we're even." I'm like, "Even for what? What the fuck? You just dissed him." Like. Even. Yeah,
I know. He said, and he only said that after Violent J jumped in front of him to save him from getting hit from a beam.
Yeah, now we're even. Now that you took a bullet for me.
Yeah, that was exactly what that was.
Yeah, I think, but they've said that in songs that they're like not that important.
Yeah. I do want to. This is, I think, the final 2 points I'm going to make about this. I thought by far, to me, the absolutely most interesting thing about the comic book, the entire comic book, was finding out there were other clowns, or not finding out, but getting confirmation there are other Dark Carnival clowns. That there's a whole bunch of them, and like I thought the scene of like all these like clowns just like fucking causing chaos was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I thought that was the most interesting thing to me, of like, yes, there are a bunch of clowns in the Dark Carnival. ICP is just like these two rogue clowns who are into it, you know, in business for themselves, basically, to a certain extent. And the second thing was the only named woman in this entire comic book who isn't a victim of something, because there are a couple named women, but it's like someone that like the police chief is like beating up or something, like his wife. Or whoever that was supposed to be. Like, there are the occasional named woman, but they're either strippers, they're servants of Kilnor, or they're victims of domestic abuse. The only named woman who isn't one of those things is a clown named Squeezy. That's all.
I wish I knew what number it was. There is a panel where I believe it's in issue number 6, where there is a demonic clown wearing a clown costume reading the issue number 6 of ICP's comic. So it's like he's reading his own issue, which I thought was and there's very few things like that. What made me think of it was, you mentioned Squeezy. There's one in issue like 11, I think it is. She turns the page for you.
Yeah,
but she's not in the scene.
No,
she's just there.
She's just there.
And that's what made me think of this other clown, I think, which is I'm pretty sure it's in issue 6. That doesn't belong in the story at all. It's just sitting there reading a comic.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's kind of what they're all about.
And then that other clown, kill Bin Laden.
Right.
I stared at that for so long. I was like sitting there. I was like, well, what did I miss? It's like, I don't understand why this is here. And I was like looking back, and I was like, did they talk about terrorism or something? I was like, and I didn't know. I was like, and then I finally just had to like move on, being like, okay, I just don't get that.
Well, I'll tell you guys what. I didn't think it was the best comic that I ever read. But if I was gonna go back and read Cerebus, but when I got to Reeds, I would much rather read these 12 books.
No. I would still rather read Reeds. If you guys don't know what we're talking about, go read 300 issues of Cerebus. It's worth it, ultimately.
I do recommend that you read all 300 issues of Cerebus.
I'm just glad that we don't have to read this comic book ever again, and I'm sorry to those of you who read it and also didn't enjoy it. To those of you who read it and did enjoy it, fucking awesome. I'm very happy. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Because guess what, guys? I looked this up on Goodreads, and it has like a not insignificant number of reviews, and the average user review is 5 stars. So,
hell yeah.
Yeah. And and it's not like they're like, it's not like they're artifacts, because one of them is from just a couple years ago, and they were like, I love this story years ago, and I love it now when I reread it. And I was like, all right, cool. Right on. But Steve, I think you wanted to talk about one of the songs, but I think I cut you off.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did. But just real quick, one of the things I thought was funny was that I actually laughed at was when they were in the void at some point, I think in issue 11, or maybe it's 12, and a demon like punches a hole through Shaggy, and he dies. As he falls off the cliff, he's all, I'm outie. Yeah. I just thought that was hilarious. Yeah. So.
I also thought it was like Shaggy always dies. Like Shaggy gets fucked up in like almost every issue, and like Violet J never gets a scratch on him. Which I thought was pretty telling. So the tracks were intro. God, no. Oh, I mean, I guess it's cool you got issue number 1, but whoops. The Amazing Maze rules. I Don't Care, featuring Twisted. $50, obviously rules. The Great Show, Toxic Love, Ain't Nothing But a Bitch Thing, we covered. Oh yeah, that's right. Oh, that's why there's 14 tracks, because Pendulum number 7 came with a Psychopathic Raida's EP, basically. So Pendulum 7 came with 3 tracks, which was What Raidas Do for Money, Who Wanna Flex, and I Don't Wanna Die. And when they compiled the Pendulum into the Pendulum tome, when they compiled the singles into the album, they took those 3 tracks out because they're not licensed, and they replaced them with an intro. So that's why there's 12 tracks on the actual album, but 14 tracks that were released with the comics. So 3-song EP in issue number 7, and then Confessions, Superstar, Are You Wicked, Run, and Scanta Claus featuring ABK. I hope it's actually Scanta Claus, and it's a ska track.
When we got those comics, we were living in the city, and we listened to And Toxic Love was the song that came with one of our comics. And I just always super loved that song. And it's just a great song. It's a funny story. It's an actual sex song.
But it's a sex song about a guy fucking a barrel of toxic waste.
Yes! And it's just brilliant. And I love it. I mean, just like the verses are hilarious. I remember sharing it with someone I worked with before, and we had this huge inside joke for years where we just say the whole car smells like pickles, and we'd both go and it's also got the X-Files in the chorus, and it just works in really well, and so just great song, great story arc. Starts off coming out of the sane asylum, finds a hot chick, her Ned is yellow, smells like pizza, all that good stuff. And ends with him like going back to the insane asylum. Yeah.
I don't think I ever heard that song before.
Really?
Oh, it's so good, dude. Yeah. Now I've always loved that song.
Nice.
That song just cracks me up.
Awesome. Well, anything else to add, guys?
No, man. What are we doing next week?
Well, what we're doing next week is we're talking about The Wraith. Shangri-La, The Wraith, the 6 Jokers card. It's finally here, everybody. The first half of the 6 Jokers card. Woo! I'm very excited. What we're going to try and do, and you know how these things normally go, my friends. It's not always a guarantee we're going to get to all the tracks because we're going to talk about some background and general thoughts and what have you. But we're going to try to talk about, because they're fairly short up front on this album. So we're going to try to talk about Walking to the Light, Welcome to the Show, Get Your Wicked On, Murder Rap, and Birthday Bitches. We're going to try and talk about the first 5 tracks off the album. We'll see how far we actually get, but that's the plan. So listen to those, and we're very excited that we get to talk to you about those next week. So until next time, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Dim Carnival. We love getting emails, as you heard at the top of the show. So email us at dimcarnival@gmail.com. You can find me on all social media. Last week, my very, very pleased that Boom Studios put out the WWE WrestleMania 2019 special number 1. And I have the lead story in that. It's 10 pages, Asuka versus Charlotte. I'm really happy with how it came out. I couldn't be happier. I'm very excited. So I denigrated an entire comic book this episode, so you guys get to see if I'm any better at all at doing this bullshit. And if I'm not, let me know. If you think my story sucked, let me know. So check that out if you want to, if you like wrestling. Even if you don't like wrestling, I mean, it doesn't help me at all. I already got paid, but yeah, it's. I didn't get paid much. I'm not going to get residuals off this shit or anything. So just if you're excited, because I'm excited because fucking WrestleMania is in 2 weeks. But I'm very stoked to get to write about it. I mean, Asuka even tossed me the like and the retweet, and she's rad as hell. So that's cool. Anyway, if you want to pick that up, it's on newsstands now, or you can order it online from Boom Comics, or you can order it from Midtown Comics or wherever fine comic books are sold. So there's that. But yeah, until next week, I'm Bill.
I'm Ryan.
Steve's so sad to be Steve. I'm Steve.
Good evening everybody, time to introduce myself. I ain't the kind of rapper that'll brag about my wealth, but I am the kind of thing you hear go bump in the night. I'm like the shadow in the corner just beyond your sight. I'm that monster that pursues you in your very worst dreams. Kinda like an incubus, but I'm feeding for your screams. Combine Jack the Ripper and the New Jersey Devil and get something like this killer on a whole other level. For centuries I've played this game, now everybody knows my name. You imitators come off lame, you'll never reach this world acclaim. I hear you crying out in shame as you'll perish in my flame. I know you hate what I became, and now you know this monster is out there. Cursed to be immortal and too stubborn to quit. A few 100 years old and I'm still doing this shit. There can be no upper limit to the killing that I'll do. I'll rip the plants out your garden, fucking murder them too. Now like my beats I'm overweight and like my lyrics I'm fat. I'm that slowly walking after you stalker kind of psychopath. Not a man-made monster, I'm a monster-made man. And you're all here to bear witness to my master plan. Murderlust starts to consume me when the skies turn dark and gloomy. Screaming like a fucking loony, bitch, this ain't no horror movie. Apparitions blow right through me, vampires call up like they knew me. Zombie sluts begging to screw me cause they know this monster is out there. I ain't like nothing that you've seen, not online or movie screen. Not quite man, but in between, a mutant just like Wolverine. With tiger blood like Charlie Sheen. October 31st you scream cause each and every Halloween you've been warned this monster is out there.